Welcome to Stories. We believe that every person has a story worth telling and that every story has value. And today I am joined by Captain Coder, Marisa VanSkiver. So Marisa is the other half of Hexcode Designs here in Wichita, Kansas. You're a client of Quick.
It's true.
Really appreciate your support.
And it's so easy to use that it wasn't even hard to convince the other half to spend $7 a month. It's like, this saves me an hour of time. We're doing it.
So awesome. But you are the web developer.
Yes, I'm on Nevercode. My older brother is actually a software programmer, and he was building websites and other things when he was about 18, and I literally saw the guy make $10,000 in 2 weeks. And my first thought was, I want to go to there, because that sounds great, right? And then I started to really get into HTML. So I used GeoCities, if you guys remember that, when I was about 13. And you could do drag and drop, and then it would show you what code it was producing behind. So I started learning HTML that way. It was literally teaching myself. I got through high school. I did a HTML class where I did the whole class in 2 weeks, and it was a 9-week class, so I did the second class in the next 2 weeks, and then I spent the rest of the 2 9-week periods installing software on computers around school. So I started learning that way, and I got hired at 18 by a company here in town. It was a computer repair place, and they hired me at 18 to work on their website and do some other stuff. And it was great because they let me work remotely too. I went off to college, and I had a 20-hour-a-week job that I sat around my apartment in Denver, and then I got hired to do ASP.NET coding, which is the worst. C# back at school for one of the departments. The best part was I knew how to code in PHP, which is another programming language, and I sort of kind of knew some .NET, but not really. So I had to basically learn it for the job. And so I did a lot of the front-end coding, and then I had to learn how to code .NET C# while I was getting paid $14 an hour, which was fantastic.
In college?
Yeah, in college as a sophomore. But I wanted to learn more about kind of everything that went into a website, and so that's how I approached it. So I did the development, and I learned that, and that's fun, and it's a puzzle every time. It's something different, and it's a logic problem. Mm-hmm. But I also really like the writing component of it and the SEO part, and so I taught myself that.
Did you teach yourself video editing?
Yeah, that too. That was kind of more of a need. We needed to be able to do very simple Facebook ads for a couple clients, and you just kind of learn it as you go. And we do outsource to a really great animator for bigger projects, but for the most part, if it's kind of clean, simple, something that I can do, we have some templates that I created that we can use.
That's great. What do you use?
Premiere Pro, because we have the Adobe suite. So, and I don't like Macs.
You're a web developer. How many women web developers do you know?
Surprisingly, a few in Wichita. So I'll be honest, when I started working professionally, I either was a single person team, that first job, and then when I got hired at university, I walked into a basement office with no windows, and I got told, this is the nerd cave, and there were 5 boys in there, and they literally looked at me with eyes like this, and they're like, there's a girl. I've gotten jobs, and I've had supervisors who didn't think I was up to par, simply because I was female, so they didn't give you a shot. And it doesn't happen a lot, but it's happened a couple of times. And I got hired on in a place when I lived in the UK. I got hired on a place in Edinburgh, and I was one of 3 females on the team. We had, the main portion of our job was glorified HTML data entry. You adjusted HTML code to be more accessible. That adjusted HTML code wasn't anything hard, and there were a couple of older ladies in their 30s and 40s that were working there. I was 26, 27 at the time. So they look at me and they think, oh, you're like them. No. And within the first few weeks, I had to build a code that converted some CSV files into a custom XML called Onyx, with an upload-download system. Yeah. But then I came here and I got onto a team where it was amazing. It was 2 other women developers and myself, and then 1 guy. And within, I was like, oh, that's different. It's usually multiple men and me. Yeah. It's not got anything to do with boys are pushed to it more, I think, than others. I think it's a little bit more that girls are kind of pushed sometimes to other things, yes. Yeah. But when I was growing up, there was no coding classes at young ages. So when I was living in Scotland, I volunteered with a group of kids that were about 10 to 12 years old. We started out with 20. It was a good mix of half boys, half girls, to teach them how to code. By the end of the program, we had 5 boys left, and that was it. That would kept showing up, one girl. And for whatever reason, that has been a tendency to happen. I once had somebody say, "Oh, I just wish that somebody had really," and it was a girl, "I wish that somebody had really pushed me into going into coding because I think I would like it." And I'm like, well, A, you're in your 20s, so you can learn it now.
Yep.
Nobody's stopping you. Nobody told me to go into code. I saw my brother do it, and I thought, oh, that looks like fun. So it's each developer, each coder, for the most part, it was something that interested them enough that they did a lot of research on their own and they taught themselves. Very few, like I said, very few people I feel like get into it when they get to school and they go, oh, I want to learn computer science. It's just not something that happens very often.
Yeah.
When I've interviewed developers before, I ask, what got you into coding? When I want to hire somebody, I go, okay, what got you into coding? How did you start coding? And if the answer isn't, well, I was kind of messing around and I wanted to figure this out, and they could have been older, they could have been in their 20s when they figured it out, I don't care. But as long as it's about, it's kind of that self-taught, passionate, like continual learning discovery, then they're going to be a good coder. If you tell me, well, I thought it would be a good job, and it's a nice challenge, I'm like, but you're not passionate about it. You're not doing all this research on your own after hours. You're not going to get better. You're not going to grow.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate part of our industry is code changes all the time. We went from PHP 5.6 being kind of norm on most servers to PHP 7.3 now being the norm on most servers within the last year. So it's huge sweeping changes, and code breaks. And if you're like me and you code with WordPress a lot, WordPress is making huge changes. And if you don't like coding, if you don't like what you're doing, if you don't like the research part of it, you're not gonna stay in it very long. So for us now, a website is generally speaking about a 4-month process from down payment to launch. When you start that process, and a lot of times if I'm not writing the copy, I'm overseeing the copy production. And so I get involved from that very start. And then watching that build, and then watching from what my copy is to what Chrissy and Taylor, our designers, can do with that copy, things that I never would have thought of. And then, taking those flat pieces and how I can take that and write that story in code. And that's where a lot of people, when they look at me, they're like, well, how do you take an English degree and do this? I'm still telling stories.
Yeah.
My job is telling stories all day long. I'm just telling brand stories, and I'm telling it through code. And that's what you have to look at it as. But it totally changes your perspective. And when I worked for a startup during college at one point, where my job was literally fixing bugs in this system. That's not fun. It's not fun to be the bug chaser. It's so much more fun for me to build that project from start to finish too, because I can work on it for a little bit, then I can move on to something else, and it helps keep my creativity flowing with it and everything else.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me because I took a PHP class in college, for instance, because I wanted to learn PHP. Our instructor, he would put stuff on the screen and we would test it out, but really it was just more he was a resource, and he's like, okay, I want you to build this, start here and build this small program. You learn a little bit in those settings, but most of it you get from just building it and figuring out, okay, I want it to do X, how can I make it do that? Go to Google.
Well, I love that you love telling stories, because so do we.
Oh, I have noticed.
And I love your story. And there's so much more I want to know. I want to know about your time in the UK. Did you go to university in the UK?
I did. So I did my master's degree. That's why I moved over there. So I did my master's degree over there in modern Scottish literature. It makes a lot of money for me now. But it was great. And at the time, that's what I thought I wanted to do. Coding at the time paid my way through school. And then I thought, I'm going to go on and get my doctorate and go back and work with my mentor. None of those things happened. Life happens, plans change, and everything else I'm probably way happier doing what I do now than I would be in academia and arguing about publishing deadlines. So
I could totally see you there, though.
Oh yeah, I'm yelling at college students all day long.
Well, thanks for coming to the Quick offices.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, that's good.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Stories. If you want to hear more stories, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next week.